Tom Mohrman's with us, the Marine Program Manager of Mississippi, the Nature Conservancy. Tom, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. It's a beautiful morning here on the coast.
It is in Old Biloxi. Now, you got to be gentle with me because I'm a landlubber, a Delta boy, and there's so much that we don't know about oyster fishing and everything else. So be gentle with me as we learn together. But one of the things we do know, when we passed this bill a couple of years ago, well, in the 2023 session, there were a lot of people who said, you know, we want to make sure that this thing, if we invest some money, we do this, that it comes to fruition. And I think it's been tremendously successful already. One of the things that it has done is the first completed project in Mississippi is we're talking about the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. But this is a Oyster Reef and restoration project. So tell us a little bit about it, where it is, what it means, and what it does.
Sure. So my name's Tom Mohrman. As you already mentioned, I'm the director of the coastal program for the Nature Conservancy. And the project that you're talking about, funded through the Mississippi Outdoor Stewardship Fund, is a subtitle Oyster Reef project in Bay St. Louis. So it's located south of the Wolf River, west of Bayou Portage by Pass Christian, Mississippi, here on the coast. So it's a nearshore fishing reef accessible by at least 5 boat ramps, public accessible boat ramps, within less than 2 miles. So it's located in a place where hopefully people can get access to. The idea is we're creating a 3-dimensional oyster reef that would also serve as a nearshore fishing habitat.
Do you lease it out to the private concerns, or is it a governmental operation, or explain that?
So this is a public area. So water bottoms, I believe, are managed by the Secretary of State's office and the Department of Marine Resources. TNC, or the Nature Conservancy, is a nonprofit entity. So our mission is to protect lands and waters that are vital for wildlife, fisheries, and people. And Bay St. Louis is a key location for this. It's a beautiful bay. It's a great fishing area.
Yeah.
And enhancement of oysters helps to benefit, enhancement of oysters in the bay helps to benefit oysters outside of the bay because of the way the water flows. So as we produce oyster larvae in Bay St. Louis, the downstream effects are that when they reproduce, they're going to put larvae in the water. They're going to float for about 2 weeks. And hopefully they're going to settle out onto the commercial reefs that are in the outer bay.
Okay, all right. So it's habitat enhancement, basically, is what it is.
Yeah, and trying to create recreational fishing opportunities.
Yeah. Can you fish or harvest in that area?
It is definitely open to recreational fishing. Right now, we still have barges out there deploying material. Mm-hmm. So there are warning signs, so please don't go out there today, but in about a month, it'll probably be all complete and ready for anglers to go out there. It's going to take a couple months for fish to settle in there, but it should be a really good hotspot, because what's going to happen is you're going to have invertebrates like crab and shrimp start inhabiting that reef. We're creating what's called vertical height. So it's not just the flat bottom. There are going to be mounds, a matrix of mounds over 35 acres about. And that creates complexity that attracts all the marine organisms. So as the shrimp and crabs show up and the worms and all the things that live in the mud adjacent to it start colonizing, it's going to attract recreational fish. So.
What do you seed this with? Showing my knowledge of oysters, what do you seed this with? In other words, if you're trying to stock a pond with fish, you put fingerlings in there. Because you've got... I'm reading here over 11,000 limestone rock pods or mounds, and so what do you put on there?
So what makes this reef a little bit unique from an oyster and recreational fishing standpoint is typically when you're growing oysters for crop or for product, to harvest and to eat, you want a flat bottom. Makes it easy for oyster tongs, oyster dredges to get in there and remove the oysters from it. But we're creating approximately 1.5 foot mounds instead. So this creates vertical height and the complexity I talked about before. It also creates more surface area. So there are oyster larvae naturally occurring in the water. Mississippi from last I heard, is not a spat dependent system. Some places spat is larval oysters. Some places in the country, they don't have spat still in the water, so they need to seed projects. Currently, that doesn't seem to be an issue here in Mississippi. The last 2 spat sets sounded like they were pretty good last fall, and it looks like this spring might be a good one too. So basically, we're counting on the wild oyster larvae that are in the water to colonize the reef initially. In other places, you might want to jumpstart colonization, and by that you would get what's called spat on shell or larval oysters placed directly onto the reef. But at this point, we don't see that as a need.
Is it brackish water?
Yeah, so it's definitely brackish water. So it's not straight salinity of the ocean, and it's not straight fresh water. So it's a mixing zone. And that actually works to our benefit a little bit, because some of the pests that come to oyster reefs, like oyster drills and different bacteria, are either repulsed by extreme salt or repulsed by extreme fresh. So when you have naturally occurring alteration of fresh and salty, it kind of puts you in that sweet spot.
Do the universities do any study on this at all, or do you have the study going on at any central location?
So as part of, we're funded through 3 different sources. One of them is the NIFWF, or National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's Gulf Environmental Benefit Fund. And one of the keys for that project is monitoring in the long term. So we haven't set aside a subaward yet, but we do have funding to do a contract with a university, most likely to do an analysis of the reef. So we'll likely be collecting the raw data and taking, hopefully, grad students out there at some point to measure. We'll be looking at oyster density. We'll be looking at what's called a size class distribution. So trying to identify when oysters settle on there and measure them through adulthood. So you want a nice distribution of sizes, but the actual analysis will likely be done by a university partner.
Tom Mohrman, who is with the Nature Conservancy. What are we talking about from beginning to harvest size as far as time length?
In Mississippi, it's a little bit faster than other parts of the country due to the temperature of the water. So aquaculture oysters grow a little bit faster and can get to market sooner, but wild oysters are probably about a year to a year and a half before they can be harvested and taken to market. This reef is actually located in a place that is closed to commercial harvest, and that's actually one of the features of the project. We're trying to create oyster larvae, oyster babies that ultimately make it out to the other reefs. So if you disturb that 3-dimensional structure in the long term, it might impact the ability of the oysters to reproduce.
Plus, Tom, in the last few years, all the way from Katrina on to that major flooding we had, it's done a lot of damage, so this was needed in a bad way.
Yeah, oysters used to be a critical part of the coastal economy, especially pre-Katrina. But, due to natural disasters and the oil spill, we're kind of in a rebuilding phase. So this is a project. We hope we've incorporated some resiliency to it so it can better survive sort of the chronic freshwater conditions that we sometimes experience. The added height, in addition to creating more surface area, gets you above the water bottom. So at the very bottom of the bay, it's mud. And when you have freshwater events, you typically get a low DO or low dissolved oxygen event that coincides with it. Hopefully by raising the surface area above the sea floor, you're creating conditions that they're not going to be in that low DO all the time and hopefully survive an event. So.
Yeah. Here's a final question here. Am I more likely to find a pearl in an agriculture or wild oyster?
I think most of the pearls are coming from aquaculture oysters that are specifically grown for pearls. I've only once had a little bit of silt that kind of maybe was a pearl, but I think it might have been more of a chip than a actual something.
Well, what do you do to an oyster to enhance the pearl will be formed?
Well, this is definitely not. From what I understand, the folks who do this professionally, they insert some kind of adjutant into the shell, and as a response, the oyster creates a secretion that starts to form the pearl to basically smooth it out and make it less irritating.
The pearl comes from an abnormality. Isn't that ironic? Tom, it was a pleasure, sir. I know more now about oysters than I've ever done before, and I thank you, sir. I think I know what's on the menu for tonight. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Tom.
All right. Thank you.